Hey folks, this is The Constant Show where we talk about movies, and I am Constant. This week we will be talking about the 1993 Chris Ween Hallowmas Jingle Hell Rock that is Nightmare Before Christmas. Throughout the course of this video, I intend to prove mainly just one thing. Jack is clearly the villain of this story. So we'll go through the events of the movie, kind of the results of them, and the conclusions that can be naturally inferred from such. So the basic premise of the movie is that every holiday has its own little town that's hidden through a door in the forest. Each one of them is like a theme park that just embodies the spirit of whatever town it is. There's an Easter one, you got the leprechaun, there's holidays, and each of them is hidden behind a tree. The main character of the story is Jack Skellington. Jack is the pumpkin of Halloween Town. He is its de facto leader despite the fact that they hired a mayor. Just stop and think about that for a second. This town full of people got together and then they voted on which person gets to listen to Jack with no actual input. Also in Halloween Town is Sally, who's indebted to her creator so reluctantly that she unsews her arm to escape him. She's a Frankenwoman. After a successful Halloween that Jack enjoyed, he even talks about how it's the best Halloween ever, it's the most terrific, and how much fun he had. He goes to the cemetery and then he just switches between equal parts bored and arrogant. It demonstrates key flaws in his character. He's emotionally unstable, and he's prone to these almost delusional whims. It hasn't even been 10 minutes since he was celebrating the last Halloween that he's now having an existential crisis. Sally and Dr. Frankenwoman, they get into a tussle about her poisoning him to escape. Jack figures out that there's other holiday-themed towns. The one that he picks is Christmas. He wrecks a snowman and he creeps on a bunch of people. He wakes up this kid from bed. The entire time he's just treating it like a theme park. I know I said they look like theme parks, but at the same time there's an entire civilization of people living here, and this guy is just treating it like a playground. It's disrespectful is what I'm saying. Despite his fascination, he's also immediately disagreeable towards it. What's this? What's this? There must be something wrong. He also feels like he wants to own it. This entire sequence is kind of telling of Jack's mind state. There's a lot of entitlement to just show up in this town full of people and then go, yeah, they should belong to me. I should be the boss of this place too. Halloween Town realizes that Jack is missing and it's cause for literal alarms. They're sounding the bells like this is a real crisis. What are we gonna do without our tyrant king? Sally poisons the doctor again so that she can escape. She tricks him into drinking it with this spoon that has holes in it. It's a very clever choice. I liked it. So Jack returns home. He's intent on bringing Christmas to the people of Halloween Town. He holds a town hall that everybody goes to. He tries to sell them on the idea of presents. It's a box and it's got a ribbon. And they ask questions about it. The questions that you would have if you lived in a Halloween themed town. So they're like, does it bite? Do you hide stuff in there? Jack can't answer any of these questions, which just goes to show that he doesn't understand Christmas. If he did understand it, he would be able to communicate those ideas. Despite this, Jack tells them that they don't understand. And we see later in the movie, whenever he's delivering presents, that his understanding of it was no better than theirs. Even at the end of this song, he has a line about how he's just kind of going with it because they're interested in it. At the very end of the song, he starts talking about Santa Claus and how he's this monstrous, scary guy. But he's basing this on absolutely nothing. He has no evidence of this, and the only reason that you would do that is to sell it to this crowd. So he's completely willing to bastardize an entire culture just so that he can appease its relevance to him personally. Then we get to Jack's research. It begins with him just opening a book about Christmas and then just tossing it, and then opening another one to just a random page, which I think is kind of telling. It shows his disrespect for the culture, but also his lack of context for it. All of these traditions exist in a greater whole. So the doctor gets kind of fed up with Sally about her repeated escape attempts, and he decides that he's going to lock her away. Shortly thereafter, Jack visits, and he's like, hey, I need some science equipment because I'm still trying to figure out this Christmas thing. I've been obsessed with it for like a day and I still don't understand it. I just want to mark this point because it's a point where Jack goes to the doctor and then asks him for something. The doctor doesn't, ask for anything in return, which of course he wouldn't because Jack is the pumpkin of town. Everybody is afraid of him. I think it's interesting when Jack tries to analyze Christmas using the scientific method. It shows that he can't consider these things outside of his own frameworks. Sally jumps from the window, landing on the ground, and then re-sewing herself back together to escape. Jack has more difficulty understanding what Christmas actually means. And then he thinks to himself for, a decent amount of time and realizes that the problem with Christmas is that it doesn't actually belong to him and that he could make it better. Just to mark the point that we're at in the movie, he doesn't understand Christmas and he thinks this is somehow Christmas's fault. So then Jack assigns the Christmas people to building out toys for him. Given the critiques that he gives people, it seems like Jack's not helping at all. At one point, a guy is like pounding on a rat. Jack walks up to him and he's like, a bat would make a better present. Judging from what we all know about Christmas, this is just a completely arbitrary distinction. There's no Christmassy reason for why a bat would make a better present than a rat. They're both terrible. Igor and the doctor whip up Jack's sleigh. They even give us a shot of Igor being like, what do you think of this for the design? The doctor is like, yeah, let's do that. Let's make him some skeletal reindeer. Keep in mind, this is the second time that Jack has just assigned something to the doctor, and the doctor's just made it happen. Jack recruits Oogie Boogie's henchmen children in order to kidnap Santa. There's not a way I can say that makes that sound heroic. But then also, despite being Oogie's henchmen, he distinctly tells them not to involve Oogie, in which case it would probably be better to have somebody else go kidnap Santa. Or maybe, he could go kidnap Santa, but instead, he just assigns it to these 3 mercenary children. We don't even really learn about Oogie Boogie until Jack is trying to undercut his staff. Also, Jack gives them so little direction that they come back with the Easter Bunny, and then when they do, he again acts like it's their fault, despite the fact that, the whole reason they didn't go kidnap Santa is because they couldn't figure out which door it was, which tells me that he didn't give them clear enough instructions, which is oftentimes a problem when you're working with children. But you probably shouldn't be using children to kidnap holiday icons. Sally tries to warn Jack that Christmas is just not a good idea. She had some kind of premonition and it's not going to work out. I think it was just common sense, really. Jack completely ignores it, and as she gives the warning, he thinks that she's talking about his suit because that's why he's in her presence. You'll notice that every time Jack is interacting with another character, it's usually to his benefit. The town spends the rest of the season making Christmas presents in order to appease Jack. The Pumpkin of Halloween Town has just allocated all of this town's resources to his personal whim. This would be like if the president of your company came to every individual employee and they're like, guys, look, I need you to put together this sports car that I got for my midlife crisis. So the henchmen children bring Santa to Jack as Jack is in the middle of ignoring another warning from Sally. He's like, man, there's still something missing. So then Santa shows up. Jack snatches his hat, doesn't even talk to him. He's just like, yeah, you got the season off. And then the kids drag him off like some little mobsters. Jack tells them to put him in a safe place, but at the same time, these are Oogie Boogie's henchmen children. And if he really wanted Santa safe, he could have just said, hey guys, take him back to my house. So they take Santa. They throw him through this pipe, and he falls down, and then Oogie captures him, and then we get Oogie's character song, which just mainly talks about how he's a bad boogeyman who likes to gamble. But he tells you in the song that he'll cheat you. Jack then proceeds to go on such a rampage, giving people these scary presents that it warrants military intervention. And I say traumatized because this is an 8-year-old kid, and he's got a sunken head. Even his parents screamed. That's 3 people in one household, and he hit half the world. If you're an 8-year-old who gets a puppy, it doesn't change the fact that you were chased around your house for 15 minutes by a haunted duck. So then Sally, being the actual hero of our story, goes to rescue Santa Claus, and she almost gets away with it. She uses one of her Franken legs at the door while the rest of her body slips in, tries to get Santa, but she gets captured. And then we cut back to Jack, who it seems like he's going to have his first moment of genuine reflection at this point. He's like, what have I done? What have I done? Before saying nobody really understood, all I wanted to do was bring them something great, and I did my best. Now, all 3 of these things are demonstrably false. He says that nobody understood. The only person in the story who is misunderstood has been him. Sally understood, that's why she warned him at least twice not to do this. 2, all I wanted to do was bring them something great, which is interesting because that has never been his motivation. At the very beginning of the story, it's about his lack of personal satisfaction and meaning in his life. That's the void that Christmas seems to fill. 3rd, I did my best. Throughout all of these events, you'll notice that pretty much the only thing that Jack does is assign one of his tasks to somebody else. He only really gets involved when it's the cool part, whenever they've got the sleigh built and all the toys inside. He didn't make a single toy. He says, for the first time in a long time, I feel like my old self, which is crazy because Halloween was just 55 days ago. So Jack, realizing that he's done with Christmas, because that didn't really work out, and it's kind of Christmas's fault because Christmas sucks, and he's the pumpkin, goes back to town to like rescue Santa. And whenever he shows up, Oogie Boogie is genuinely scared. Like, he backs down. And you're supposed to feel like Oogie's house of traps is something that's going to stop Jack. But I'd just like to point out the fact that he just got hit by a missile. So I don't think these, like, guns that they're shooting at him are going to make that much of a difference to the guy who can decapitate himself at will. He eventually backs Oogie onto this platform above the lava, and Oogie is like cowering there, right? He's done. He's out of the fight. Jack could just go rescue Sally and Santa, but instead, Jack finds this stitch of Oogie Boogie and then just like rips him apart. He skins him alive. It's terrible. I think it's particularly egregious. It seems like the moral of the story is that you should find happiness wherever you're at, which is what Oogie Boogie was doing. He didn't leave his house, and then they just threw Santa inside of it, and then he got murdered by a home invader. And then Jack realizes that the thing he was missing all along that would truly fulfill him was actually Sally. True love. Or not, because if you consider pretty much every interaction they've had, he hasn't understood what she was saying to her either time that they talked. Despite the fact that she's so enslaved that she would throw herself out of a window just to be free, he doesn't make an effort to have her free. If he actually cared about her, he would have, talked to the doctor at the beginning of the movie and said, hey, I think it's not cool that you have the Frankenwoman. And as the pumpkin, what I say goes. They say in the beginning of the song, all hail the pumpkin. Not some hail the pumpkin. And we have no reason to think that Sally is any less of a whim than Christmas is. There's no fight between the Doctor and Jack at the end of the movie, because it's a foregone conclusion that Jack will get what he wants from the residents of Halloween Town, which I think is unfair to all of them, really. Some of you might be a little bit awestruck by the idea that Jack would be so blatantly awful. Well, there's this thing called protagonist-centered morality, and it basically goes that the viewpoint character to a story, you kind of inherit their perspective. So in the same way that you would make rationalizations and sort of defense responses for yourself, you would do the same for the viewpoint character, because in a way they're that door in the forest. To demonstrate, I'd like to show what a heroic version of Jack would look like. And for that, we have to look to Alice in Wonderland. And the reason for that is their stories mirror each other really well. Both of them star bored leads who imagine a fantasy world, and then the next thing they know, they're in it. But the way in which they both approach the idea of a new world is in drastically different directions. Jack is frequently arrogant, while Alice is humble. Whenever she enters a situation, she tries to communicate with the residents of Wonderland. Between the worlds, hers is the more ridiculous of the two, because that's like its whole thing, is it's literally ridiculous. But despite that, Alice makes every effort to engage with the residents of it in their own speak. There's an example where she's talking to the flower, and the flower says, "What's your species?" And she says, "Humanus Alice." She's making an effort to communicate back in the same way. Her respect for the traditions of Wonderland is present throughout her every interaction with it. Later on, she would go to the tea party, and she sits in an empty seat, which the Mad Hatter calls her out on, and he's like, "That's incredibly rude." She apologizes twice. It doesn't matter that it's ridiculous to her, she can recognize that it's important to him. And because of that, she has no problem adjusting to some of the norms of the people of Wonderland, such as celebrating the unbirthday. Or, in the end of the movie, or close to the end, whenever she meets the Queen, she doesn't set the Queen off. She de-escalates her 4 times, something that it seems like nobody else can do, because she decapitates people like all the time. It's got to be pretty frequent, because it wasn't even a plan B for her. It was like a plan 8.5. In the middle of her journey, Alice sits down and listens to an entire story from Tweedledee and Tweedledum, which I think none of us would actually do in a real life situation, but she does it. And not only does she do it, and she genuinely listens, and she asks questions afterwards because she's an active listener. Sally gave Jack 2 warnings, and still no change of character. I think the lesson that we can take from this is it's important to have an awareness of the people around you, a sort of respect for other people's being. I've always thought that rights exist only as far as they don't infringe upon another, and I think respect should be the same way. It's important to realize that the people around you have their own lives going on, their own stories and journeys that they partake in, and if you listen to them, you would be surprised at the things you never knew. You never knew. People have value outside of the value that they have to offer you. If we can take anything from this, it's that we should all be an Alice, not a Jack. You guys should like, comment, and subscribe because I realized that this face paint is not supposed to be used around the eye area and I have to go clean that out. Let me know what you think of Nightmare Before Christmas down in the comment section below. Also, movies I should cover in the future. This has been The Constant Show. I'm Constant. Much love.